everybody. Pei here with Yogacises. I have Suzanne Dulin here. She has been teaching yoga for about 20 years or so, been practicing for 30 years. She's into helping yoga teachers to improving their business, to help with like any challenges, and she also knows a lot about software. So this is going to be an interesting and fun interview. I am so excited you're here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right. So you say you've been doing yoga for 30 some years and then teaching for some years. So let's go back to earlier times, and then if you could just tell us about how you got started and what style of yoga you've been teaching and how you're helping the yoga teacher community.
Sure. So I started practicing yoga 30 years ago, but I actually got into yoga about a year before I officially started practicing yoga. So I was at Tulane University, a student there. And in my sophomore year, I had what's called an awakening experience. In Buddhism, they call it a Satori experience. In yoga, it's called a Vajra experience. But essentially what happened was I went into an altered state of consciousness for a complete day, which was a beautiful and amazing and life-changing experience. The Zen Buddhists, they say, first the mountaintop and then the laundry. So it was a strange experience where I had not had a spiritual practice. So there wasn't anything that I did that led me to have that amazing experience. I was just one of those people, and it sometimes happens, that just out of the blue got gifted with this beautiful experience, which for many years I didn't talk about because I felt that people would, sort of see me as some kind of leader when in fact the whole experience was about feeling humbled and like part of the whole. I didn't want to talk about this in a way that would separate me from people, because my whole experience had been finally to feel complete and like I was part of a whole experience, and that I was able to really listen to people and be truly empathetic in a way that I just had never been able to, but in my adult life, not been able to experience. So what happened was that it just basically happened magically out of the blue, and then it went away. And then maybe every now and then I would just feel this, like I'd be talking with somebody, I'd feel this moment of connection with them. It's just like I could experience it. It was like a visceral experience to feel that connection with someone. And then it would go away. And I didn't know, why did it happen? Like, who knows why it happened? But what did happen was that a year later, I needed to take another PE credit. I took yoga. And what I found was that visceral experience of connection, I experienced it to some small degree every time that I practiced yoga. And because I had had this big dramatic experience, early in my life, I knew that yoga was my path and that I was meant to be a teacher, that I was meant to be a good teacher. And so right from the get-go, I was very committed to yoga. And I've always been very committed to yoga. Like there's been other practices that sort of had that siren call for me, but I just didn't go that route because I knew yoga was my path. So as far as what I studied, shortly after I got that first gym class, I'm going to guess this was in the early 90s. So I'm going to guess based on what I know now that she was teaching some kind of variation of Sivananda, which was quite popular at the time. Most of the people doing it at that time were people who had done it in the 70s when there was a big wave of yoga, and then it got unpopular. It wasn't popular when I started, but it was the old hippies that were doing it. So she was probably doing some kind of variation of Sivananda style, which had been quite popular in the South. And then I discovered Iyengar. I started practicing Iyengar in Birmingham. Then shortly after college, I moved up to DC and I practiced with John Schumacher, who is the founder of Unity Woods. He's one of the top Iyengar teachers in the world. And at the time, even he was, he was just so impressive. Like even 30 years ago, like you just knew like this guy was not, he was not like, somebody who just got out of their RYT 200, like this was a guy who really was impressive and amazing. And what he was doing was he was training his teachers. So he had just opened Unity Woods and he had teachers that he was training up. And so often, because I was so new, I felt like I wasn't really, I was like, oh, I can't study with him. He's so good, like so ridiculous. But so I would study with other teachers. And what I found was that he would often sit in the back of the room and watch them teach. And then he would come up and sometimes he would interrupt them and he would say, let me show you how to teach this. That was probably the greatest experience for me. We're going to talk a little bit about teaching teachers. I saw him teaching his teachers, and I thought that's how teacher training was going to be. And he was probably teaching them the way he had been taught by Iyengar. So I've moved around quite a bit in my life. I returned to Iyengar when I moved back to Columbia, Maryland. I became quite good. I was in the level 3-4 class. I took my teacher training with Bob Glickstein at the Columbia Yoga Center, and then I left. And I left because for various reasons, but one was because I was really disappointed with my initial teacher training, like many, many people. And I thought that there would be a path toward me to become a teacher in his studio. I mean, I've been really involved with his studio for 2 years. I spent thousands of dollars there. And I didn't see that there was any path at all. So I was very disheartened by the fact that they had given me a teacher training. I paid thousands of dollars for it. And then there wasn't any assistance for me to get a job, or even like what I saw with John Schumacher, where there was a mentoring of me as a teacher. So the woman that I took prenatal yoga with, I told you my daughter's 21. She was 1 at the time I took my teacher training. The woman I took prenatal yoga with was the woman who offered me my first job, a woman I'd only taken like one class at a community college with, maybe $40, not thousands of dollars. And I just said, I'm going to go where the love is. I'm going to go with her. I began to study Kripalu with Helen Heffer. And then later, during that period, I also began to study online with Eric Schiffman, who was out in California. I became an assistant to him. I ran his discussion board, the Moving into Stillness discussion board, which is the largest and longest running discussion board. So that was sort of my whole background. And then I left because I couldn't make a living at it. And so I moved up to New York. I needed to make a living. I left my first husband. For my second husband, I needed a job. I needed a job that paid. So I just went to this fallow period with yoga where I wasn't really teaching and I wasn't really studying that much. I mean, I was some at Kripalu Yoga Center. When I got up to, I didn't know what was happening. I just knew, like, hang on, hang on, something's going on. And so there were 2 things that happened that were really important. One was I became an instructional designer, and that taught me the basics of teaching, which I'd never been taught as a yoga teacher. How actually learning works. It's all been studied educationally. I studied that. For 5 years, I became a professional instructional designer. And the other thing that happened was I got my master's in engineering management, which gave me business skills. And that was the other piece that I felt like was truly missing from yoga teacher training, is how do you actually make a living doing what you love when it doesn't look like what anybody else is doing? And those are the things that I teach yoga teachers to do.
What you've mentioned made me realize, although I'm focused on Hatha yoga and vinyasa, so there's really not much that I know about Iyengar. And nowadays I've noticed that's another thing that yoga teachers, because there's so many different branches, right? So many different paths, and there's so much to learn. And another thing is that the technical part, the engineering part is also important as for a yoga teacher, especially now, the digital world. Everybody's trying to brand their business online now, social media and everything. So it's really important to combine not only just the teaching aspect of yoga, the interaction is important, but also how to reach your audience online and get known not just within your local space, but also internationally.
We all hear this saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I have recently sort of turned that saying on its head and said, when the student is ready, the teacher has to show up. And I think that that's something that a lot of teachers are not realizing, that you have to pass your teachings on. You need to be compelled. And as far as what you were saying about not knowing Iyengar, basically Iyengar is just hatha yoga. A lot of his teachings have now been, they're sort of out there in the world, and people are just teaching basically what he taught as part of just general classes, because he had such an influence. At the time that I was teaching, that was like the big thing in the yoga world. If you wanted to be good at yoga, you were going to study Iyengar. Now, I think that now that he's passed, it's sort of not as popular. And I just think in general, there are other styles and other things that are happening. So I think it was more about that moment in time that was very popular. As far as, but the teaching, I believe that teachers, there's basically 3 ways that yoga teaching is passed on. One is through books and media, videos. The second is from your inspiration, your personal practice, sitting down and, having that moment of divine inspiration. But the third is teacher to student. And that teaching to student, that's the thing that we don't understand as much in the West, because we think of teaching as like I study philosophy. So it's like you study the major philosophers out of the books. That's how you study philosophy. But the thing is that teacher to student, that's like the main form of transmission in yoga. So if you break that chain, then what your teacher was teaching you that you spent years studying doesn't get passed on. And I think it's very, very important that we pass the teachings on to the next generation. I think it's a problem that yoga teachers are not continuing to teach and pushing to teach, because they aren't given the skills to make a living at it and the skills to teach well.
That's so true. And even during my yoga teacher training afterwards, a lot of them just not even trying to teach. They just ended up either doing their own practice, or some of them even said it's because of going through the teacher training experience, they ended up not wanting to do yoga anymore. It's because they don't want to be teaching.
So I'll talk, if you want to, I can talk a little bit about what I see is going on with the teacher training programs, because I think that what I saw happening a lot was that people take it on themselves that they are not teaching and that they didn't have a good experience at a teacher training. And I think that they need to be aware that according to learning theory, most of these teacher training programs are very poorly designed. So what we know about teaching and learning from studies that have been done since World War II is that people need to go through steps to learn. You can't skip steps of learning. And we know what those steps of learning are. Most of us are somewhat aware of these steps of learning and knowledge because we do that in school. Like if you go into school and it's the first day of class, they're going to be like, here's the definitions of, this area. We're learning sociology. Let's learn some basic definitions related to this and let's discuss it. And then you're going to start to learn these concepts and then they're going to expand it. Eventually you're going to be writing papers, comparing and contrasting things, etc. We all sort of have a sense of how school learning goes, but there's also been studies of how physical learning goes, the psychomotor domain. And there's also been studies of how we form habits and how we change emotional learning. In fact, my stepson was profoundly mentally retarded, and we always use that term because he was not able to understand and it communicated to people, but some people don't like that term, so he had cognitive disabilities. But he had, with Adam, we often set goals for his behavioral goals, like he wasn't going to be hitting himself, or he wasn't going to be, he was going to get somebody to help him go to the bathroom. These were skills that they were working on in school. and they would set these goals for him. Those weren't like he was going to understand the terms. So I got to experience those kind of learning goals being set at school. So we know exactly how learning works. And so what happens with, first of all, in order to be a teacher, you should be a master of the subject. You should be fluid. You should be creative with the subject. And there's no requirements going into teacher training that's for teachers to see whether they actually have that ability with yoga. And in fact, because most of these studios are making their money off of teacher training programs, what's happening is that the people are coming in with very low levels of skills sometimes because they're just going to sell it to whoever they can. That's how they're going to keep the rent on their studio. The other thing that's happening that people aren't talking about that much, but I've talked to lots of these teachers, is people like me who went and saw a teacher like John Schumacher, you know, who was just like so amazing. And they thought that's what a yoga teacher is. And so they waited 8, 9, 10 years before they took their teacher training. And then they got in, and there's a bunch of people in there who like never have studied yoga or who have barely been at the studio. And so they're like really disappointed because they're coming in way above the level of the class. So there's no assessment about where you come into teacher training. And then the other thing is that basically you don't assess learning by hours. So, you know, these 200-hour teacher training, useless, totally useless. That's not how you assess learning. So, if you were to come to my class and you were to be learning to read, like you have young kids, right? And you go to the teaching, go to class every day, you study learning, you get at the end of, you know, kindergarten, first grade, and you can't read, you're not a reader. I don't care how much time and effort you put into it. You assess learning by learning outcomes. So there's no assessment. Right now they've added this test of teaching, but I don't think that it's, from what it sounds like, it's a written test, and I don't really see how that's relevant to teaching. So these teacher training programs are super poorly designed. They're very expensive, and most people come out of them without really an understanding of how to teach. They don't come out. They're often, you know, they come in either underprepared for it or overprepared for it. Very few people like hit it at the right level. And then there's really no assessment whether you actually were prepared to teach. And most of the teachers that are running these programs don't even understand how to assess learning. So, you know, people are sort of pretending to be teachers based on what they did in school without understanding that teaching yoga is, it's a physical skill, it's a behavioral skill, in addition to a cognitive skill, and they don't know how to teach these other kinds of skills.
I've been told that nowadays, if you want to have a physical studio, you have to have yoga teaching programs, certification programs.
That's correct. It's keeping the doors open. This is an issue that I talk about from a business perspective, that I think these teacher training programs it's a problem. And part of the problem is that there's this idea that you're either, you know, a beginning, you know, a student or a teacher. And there should really be levels of teaching. I think that we should be looking at martial arts as an example of a much better designed system. But there you have levels, and I think we should use bracelets instead of belts, because there's levels. People are assessed at every level. You can't go up, like, you know, you start out as a white belt and then you move up to the next level. You have to test to move up to the next level. You pay for the test, you pay for the belt. So those are things that the studios can sell to make money, and they're making sure that people are being assessed. And that way it's like either you're not at the level, you need to stay where you're at, or you need to move up, because I think there's a lot of people who aren't moving up. And I think that's a big issue in the yoga world, that there's a lot of people who just keep studying. They're afraid to move up, and they're not being assessed and told to move up. And so then I think that we would have more things to sell. I also think that we need to have other levels of teaching, rather than just you're a teacher or you're not a teacher. Like, oh, you could teach a small group, or you could teach one-on-one to children, or, you know, like there's lots of ways to be a teacher in small little ways. You could assist, you could do, like lots of other programs have other ways for people to teach. And I think that the economics of this, where people, this is what is keeping the doors open, I have a lot of empathy for it, because yoga studios, like, we need them. And this is the only expensive thing they have to sell. You and I were talking about marketing funnels. It's a really bad marketing funnel. It's a terrible marketing funnel. It's not aligned to teaching methodology. What really should be happening is that 60% of your business should be coming from those really dedicated students that have gotten up to the upper tiers of teaching. They should be the people who are really sort of sustaining your studio, and you should have a lot of things for them that, are expensive but high quality. And I think that there needs to be more, it should be more broken up into modules. There should be more workshops, and teaching should be a bigger process, because I don't think that it's possible to learn it in 200 hours.
Because also those studios, they're nowadays are more money driven than my goodness, I'm running than focusing on people actually learning the skills and be able to fully prepare them to teach, is because it's like the responsibility liability thing. Like, if you just, people give out the certifications just because they showed up. And
well, I'm kind of mixed on it, and I'll say this, because first of all, I don't know, I kind of hear these two sides of the argument where people are always like, oh, there's all these people going into yoga for the money. And I'm like, really? Because every yoga teacher I know is busted broke, trying to, from the yoga side. I don't know too many yoga teachers who are like raking in the cash. If you want to make easy cash, I think a yoga studio is definitely not the way to go. So I don't know too many people who open up a studio for the big bucks, but I do think that people need to keep their doors open, and this is what they're being told, and they're, the only way that they can do it is to do that. I think it's a problem. I think it's a problem that this is the way that they're making their money. So I don't think that, I think that if you're running a business and you're not paying attention to the money, then you're doing it wrong. So I don't think that there's a problem that people are trying to make sure that they keep the roof over their head. I think it's a problem that the way these systems are set up. And I think that we need to really look at it. And what you were saying about the fact that they give the certificate to the people, that's a problem. Because, like, for example, I was studying in martial arts. I think they have a better system. In martial arts, the way it works is that in order for somebody to be a black belt, that's how you become a teacher in the system. They actually bring in other black belts from other studios to come and assess whether that person actually is qualified to represent the style. So that's the huge issue, is that there's no independent assessment of teachers. And now they've added this test in, a national test, but I still think, like, who cares whether I could pass a multiple choice test? That really isn't an assessment of my skill to teach. I think it needs to be decentralized. I think each system needs to have their own system. I think everybody needs to be taught how to properly set up teaching systems. One of the things about Iyengar is they had an amazing system. They still have probably one of the best teacher training systems out there. And their teachers continue to go up in levels. You don't just become a teacher in Iyengar, you go up levels. And I think that that was one of the things that really appealed to me about Iyengar, was this sense that they understood that, there was a teaching journey and a learning journey, and that they had a path. That's what I think people need to be showing people, that they have a path. And I encourage everybody to step off this whole Yoga Alliance thing and really design great learning. I think that if you have great learning programs, that people will come and study with you, because people really want to learn.
And some of them just want to learn, not to teach, but just for themselves.
True. And they need to have another program that's just like, I've heard people call it like a yoga immersion or something like that. Like this, why? I actually just think it's a problem that people in their classes, it seems to me like that's what you should be learning in your class. Like the fact that you have to take teacher training to actually learn yoga, to me, that's a problem. Like, why are you not learning that in class? Why are the classes not progressing to the point where you're starting to feel like you're learning more? I don't understand like this idea of a class as just being kind of a workout and not actually teaching you something. And the way you learn something is to go to a teacher training program. I just think it's crazy.
Yeah, they should separate those. And I do agree with you're saying about this whole different levels. I like that idea.
Oh, good. I'd like to get that out there.
Huh? Sorry, say that again.
I'd like to get that out there, you know, like, because I think like if we had bracelets, then like even if you studied a lot of styles, you would still have an armload of bracelets that would still represent your training, even if it was very eclectic and didn't necessarily, you know, all in one style.
Mm-hmm. What's your opinion of the whole Yoga Alliance criteria and everything, and also how would you think that that's something that they would approve? Your ideas?
Okay, so I have a video out there about should I join the Yoga Alliance that people can look. If you go to YouTube and you just type in should I join the Yoga Alliance, you'll hit it. It's under my channel, Sadhana, Sadhana. My opinion of the Yoga Alliance is, first of all, I think that they lack, I don't have a lot of faith in them because of the history with them. Yoga Alliance basically started out as a pretend organization because what they wanted to do was they wanted to avoid teachers getting having a state oversight of teachers. They didn't want a state credentialing of teachers. Like, you know, to become a massage therapist, you have to be licensed in states, which has been very useful for massage therapists because, you know, it allows them to separate themselves from prostitution. So to be able to be a licensed massage therapist, that actually has really served massage therapists because now you can have, you know, you can legally advertise in a way that separates you from prostitutes. But we didn't have that problem in yoga, and so there was a real desire for us not to be regulated. And I appreciate what they did with that. The problem is what they did was they created this organization that was kind of a sham. And a lot of yoga teachers don't realize that that's what it was. So they thought it was a trade organization. Well, a trade organization, it provides ongoing training opportunities for teachers. They're the people that they serve. They regulate the training to make sure that it's a standardized training of a high quality. A trade organization offers opportunities for people to get jobs. Like, for example, one of the trade organizations that serves engineering and many different, also construction, is the project management organization. If you get that PMP certification after your name, there are people who will call you up because you have those letters after your name, because it means something. It means you learned something important. Nobody calls you up because you have an RYT 200 or a 500 or an ERYT. Those people, I know people have all the letters after their names and they're all still struggling to make a living. There is no, this program doesn't have any cred. You know, it doesn't help you. It doesn't give you anything as a teacher. What it's done is it's just sort of perpetuated the Yoga Alliance. There's a lot of money going to the Yoga Alliance, and I just don't see them giving back to the yoga community. And I see a lot of yoga teachers who are really upset about it and feel like if we fix it, then that'll fix their problem not making a living at teaching yoga. I'm encouraging people to just educate themselves about what good teaching is. I don't really care whether you get RYT or not. I think that if you're in a situation where you need to get that in order to teach, like you really want to teach at this one studio and they recommend, you know, all their teachers have to be in it, like go ahead and do that, but take at a great training program. And it's really basically whether it's part of the RYT, the Yoga Alliance system or not, basically it's irrelevant to whether it's going to be a good program or not. If it has the YA stamp of approval, it means 0. They don't actually check up on the schools to make sure that they're following things. It's just not good learning design. So I don't put a lot of stock in the Yoga Alliance, but I'm not telling people don't get it, because sometimes you need to get it. You know, like if you want to teach at studios and those studios make you have it, or you want to be a teacher training, you want to do teacher training, you need to get that ERYT so you can give other people that, fine. You know, like I'm not saying you can't do it. There's a lot of great programs that actually give that certificate out, but it's not good. The program itself basically guarantees nothing. I personally don't do it because my path is to teach people about good learning, and I don't feel that I could do it within that organizational structure. However, I will say that I think they're making some steps in the right direction with the test and with the changes to the ethics and stuff. You know, I'm pleased to see where they're going with it. There's some good people involved with it, but I'm not a supporter of it, and I don't want to be a part of it myself. And I think that you can be a great teacher without being a part of that system. I don't think that that system does a lot for yoga teachers.
Very insightful. Thank you for sharing that. So what's your approach to, you say you do consulting work with yoga teachers, and
yes.
What do you include in those?
It depends, because I work with different people, and pretty much everybody. The people that I work with have pretty unique things that they're working on. Some of the people that I work with, they're really trying to get online, and they're needing support with just sort of digital skills, business skills in general. But one of the big things that I do is apply a ladder of learning to teaching. So helping people to develop their own teaching system. I think that that's really how you make a living at yoga, is by showing people that you have a path. That when people come in, so like when I work with people individually, I assess where they are. I develop learning goals for each person, and then I assess, did they meet their goals or not? And then we reorient. So I help people to see, you know, how they develop a learning path for their students and create a system for themselves. And to me, if you want to put that in that RYT context, fine. You know, like the standards are so low, like why not? But you don't have to. To show people that you have a ladder of learning and you can take people from beginner to mastery, I think that's how you make a living at it. And I think that's how you develop a marketing funnel, because it shows you where you put the energy, developing kind of automated systems for the introductory levels of learning, so that you can sort of weed out the people that aren't really your customers, as well as sort of find the people who are your students. And then spend more of your time on the people that have already kind of bought into you, have really are discovered that you're their teacher. That to me is, you know, how you should develop a business in yoga. And that's what I teach people to do.
And how long is that process?
It depends on where people are and where they come in. So I can get people up and running with a business within like 3 sessions. And usually I've done that with people, like people come in new yoga teachers, and we'll just like set them up with a little website, a little logo, whatever, so that they can get out there and start teaching. And that's really, like, for new teachers, that's like really valuable, because there's all these things that you put in your way, and I can kind of just take those obstacles out of your way and get you up and going, give you a pricing that's effective, teach you how to sell some basically, so that you can get out there and start developing a teaching practice. My experience is that people kind of need to start it and then go away, and start it and go away. You know, it's not like learning, being a teacher, it's not just like there's a thing that you start and then you go there. I'm getting ready to do more in-depth training with people, where people come in and, you know, spend a week with me and really go in depth. But most of the people I've been working with have been online, and people are having to work around their lives. So that's the reality. Very few people can just, you know, there's nobody that I know who has gotten hired to be a yoga teacher full-time at a salary where they can support themselves. And so everybody's trying to learn how to do it while they have a full-time job or full-time responsibilities with the family.
And what's your what would you do if people are like, let's just say you're in the second or third session and they're stuck and they're like, okay, they're not moving forward. How do you deal with?
I look at people's obstacles and what are the obstacles that are in people's way. So that's something I've been thinking a lot about this year. And so it's about removing the obstacles. Everybody has a different obstacle. Sometimes it's financial. Sometimes, financial is really just, nobody really needs money, but sometimes it's a way to get something done. And so we kind of sit there and look at like, what do we think you could accomplish if you had money? One of the questions that I often ask people is sort of like, hey, if you had a magic wand and everything was, perfect and you could live this life, like where would you be now? And a lot of times just being able to envision what it would look like to be there is really valuable to people. So we just sit there and we look at what do you need to do? Like, what is the thing? Like sometimes people will say, okay, I am teaching at this country club, but the problem is that there's some very specific issue with another teacher there or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, how can we get you another place to teach? I've had people where I've helped them to get jobs where people have like full-time jobs that are really just sucking all the energy out of them, but they really want to devote themselves to yoga. And so we'll talk about that and actually find them like a temp job where they have to, it's just less, they still make money, but there's less of their own energy going into it so they can start to put more energy into the yoga teaching. So that's what I do is I look at what is the specific obstacle in front of you. And one of the big strengths to me is that because I have business skills, now I can talk about the things that are really fundamental to people's lives. There's time and money. Those are the two things that you have to devote to make something happen. And those are the things that are in people's way. So figuring out how we can free up some time, free up some money, help you to earn money, help you to get some time, like those are the things that actually help you to move forward.
That's definitely a skill that yoga teachers need to know about, and they don't usually teach you about that in yoga teacher trainings.
No, they don't.
So it's great that you're like bridging the gap.
That's the change because I can teach yoga, but I also can teach the business piece. And so it's a little bit about, sometimes it's spiritually what's going on in your life, and sometimes it's all tied up together. That was a huge thing for me to understand, like the sort of first chakra energy of survival. That was something that I tended to ignore a lot in my life. And now I realize like this is how you shift your life. You have to you apply your money and your time toward those changes. And I can help people to do that and help people to honor that in other people because we can't figure out how to do it. Sometimes we tend to discount how important it is for our students.
Do you have any recommendations for, I know you mentioned before yoga teacher training, before anybody jumps into that, and if some of the people want to just learn for their own practice, they should be in a different program for that. And that's one thing you mentioned. And how do you prepare for the next step, like in terms of doing the business or working with you?
Well, if people want to work with me, my business is Get a Bigger Boat, GABB.co. It's the website. And that's the whole idea, is that we all need more help. It comes from the quote in Jaws, where they're out and you haven't seen Jaws, the whole movie, and all of a sudden they're out on the boat and they're throwing chum in the water, and the police captain looks down and suddenly he sees Jaws for the first time, and he's just a lot bigger shark than he realized. Like really big shark, he's Jaws, and he stumbles back and he says to the boat captain, like, you're gonna need a bigger boat. And I love that he said that. Like, he didn't say like, wow, we need to shut down, summer on the beach here, or like, there's no way we're catching this thing, it's ginormous. It was just like, we need more resources. I think that people need more help. And so if you want to get more help, like come to me, and I'm really good at helping connect people to the resources that you need, whether those are business resources or yoga resources. My strength, because I ran this huge discussion board, I really know what's out there in the yoga world in a way that a lot of people don't. A lot of people are sort of siloed into Ashtanga, Iyengar, whatever their system is. And I'm somebody who kind of knows, like, you know, who all is out there. So sometimes it's like, what's your next teacher training program that serves you? What's your next workshop? Who's the next teacher that would help to advance you? And where can you find that? Or maybe just a person you need to connect to. So I'm great at that. You can also email me at Suzanne, Suzanne at gab.co, and I'll help you out with that. I'm starting to teach workshops locally in Georgia, Trenton, Georgia, at Oakleaf Cottage. It's just a beautiful, amazing space. So we'll have one in September that I'm teaching. So if people want to email me, I'll be doing a week-long teacher training. Or not teacher training, just a workshop on yoga.
Nice. That's exciting.
Thanks.
All right. What was I gonna ask? Oh yeah. So for the recommendations, so what would you recommend? Because I know you said you tapped in, like, you know, different styles and different types of yoga.
What do I recommend for people in general as far as like a great place? Well, for me personally, I've studied a lot at the Kripalu Yoga Center, and I think they're excellent. So I think that if people are seeking, if you're like looking to travel, they're a place that I highly recommend. If you're, that's on the East Coast, so it sort of depends on what's, you know, like what's available to you. But I do really love the Kripalu style. I think for people who are seeking within that RYT program, like I think that they have a great program that is within that. And I think if you're looking for a program that's, you know, you want to get those letters after your name, which I totally understand why people want that, then I think that that's a program that not only puts you, you know, gives you those letters after your name, but puts you into a great system. And where there's just lots of great teachers that are out there. And so it opens up a lot of doors and you get a lot of guidance. So I think if people are seeking that, like there's a place, especially you're in New York, it's only like 2 hours away from you. So I think for you personally, that I would love, you know, like that's a great resource for you. But then if you're on the West Coast, I think it just sort of depends on where you're at. There's a lot more yoga that's a lot higher quality on the West Coast. So I think here on the East Coast, we tend to have a few little pockets where there's some strong yoga teaching. And then on the West Coast, it's like walk down the street. There's so many great studios, so many great teachers that are out there. So if you go to LA or San Francisco, you know, like you almost can't miss. You know, there's a lot of really good teachers out there. I mean, what I would recommend is just to get in touch with me, and I can kind of help you find out where you're personally going, because I don't think there's one thing just for everybody. That's the whole problem that I see with the whole RYT system, is that I don't think there's a one path for everybody. I think yoga is an individualized path, and that we need to teach people how to help people individually navigate their personal situations.
Yes, I've been there before a couple of times, just like a day trip type of thing. Did some outdoor activities, tried the surfing one, like the sub.
Oh, cool, yeah.
And they're cooking, one of the
cooking. Nice.
I've never done like more than a one-day thing. Like I've taken a couple of classes, but those are just individual classes, not like a training program or anything like that.
So if you're watching this, you can just go out there and sort of do little activities and stuff like that. But they also do have like teacher training programs, immersives. They get major yoga teachers that come out there. And so, you know, that's, you know, like what you've done is more of the sort of like spend a day on the beautiful grounds and, you know, like do kayaking or something like that. And that's one thing that you can do. But then another thing that you can do is go out there and take a week-long program or a weekend workshop. And I've probably gone out there for the past 20 years, just studying with different teachers, like as often as I can.
I've always wanted to do that. I mean, I get their catalogs every once in a while in the mail. I was like, ooh, I would definitely want to try those.
Yeah, they have wonderful things. For me personally, it's my breakaway when I really need to sort of, like, I actually was just up there. I took it's their signature program, which is their, what's the name of it? I have to remember, but it's a program where it's sort of designed to like break you out of your current thinking and move you forward. And they've been doing that one for a really long time. I've taken it in the past, and I think it's a 4-day program. So it's a very controlled program. They keep in a very controlled environment. They used to actually, in the olden days, you would sleep in the chapel. They would break you like you didn't have any watches or any clocks, and they would sort of break your sense of time. They don't do that so much anymore, which I personally am glad about. The teacher was like, "Oh, this sucks," I'm like, "No, this is cool. Like, I'm fine with this." I liked having a little more time to process. But that program, I've done that a couple of times, and I went up there when I went full-time into yoga this year. And I just needed to sort of break away from my old life, and I knew that was the fastest way to get there. So, they have a little bit of everything. They have some things, I know a lot of the people who are on your podcast, that they're more interested in sort of the mystical aspects of things. And there's a lot of people who go there who are on that side of it. Who's the woman who teaches all about the chakras? Anadea Judith goes up there, but also Carolyn Meese goes up there. So she's like a regular person. So those kinds of things are there as well. It's not all just, like physical asana.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder. I have not been, in touch with like just, planning vacation stuff. It's like almost like a mini getaway.
Yeah, exactly. You're also close to the Omega Institute, which has a lot of similar great teachings. I haven't been to Omega, but a lot of people really love it.
I haven't been there, but my mother-in-law mentioned it a couple of times, and I see her catalog from there. I was like, oh, that place looks beautiful. I got to check that out.
It's close to you. I used to live on Long Island, so one of the main reasons that I did Kripalu and not Omega was that I could take the ferry and go up off the island, and then it was 2 hours of just this beautiful drive. Whereas to get to Omega, I had to go around New York City, and it was like 3 really horrible hours of driving. So it's like when I wanted to get away for a yoga retreat, my choice was to go on a boat over the water, through the woods, and this twisty, turny road in the fall, or like sweat it out through New York traffic. And so I always chose the beautiful drive. But for you're probably an easier drive to Omega.
Probably. I gotta look at the routes and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the recommendations.
You're welcome.
So we're talking about like physical places to go to. What are your thoughts on nowadays, these like 100% online yoga teaching programs now? You don't even have a physical place to go to, everything's online.
So this is one of the things that I'm working on with Gab. So I actually have 2 instructional designers that work with me, professional instructional designers. So I was an instructional designer by just learning how to do it on the job. But really my background was that I was a very technical person, and that was why I was hired to do training, was not so much because I understood how to do training, but because I was really technical. And then they taught me on the job. All of my coworkers were like masters in instructional design, and they taught me all the skills that I needed to do it. My coworkers that work with me on Gab, they are professional instructional designers trained that way. Particularly Joseph Robertson, he has his master's in instructional design, and his focus is on transformative learning. And one of the things that we want to show people is that it's possible to teach online and to do transformative learning online. So I think that online just means that it's happening on the internet. And personally, for me, I've had a lot of really transformational experiences in relationships that I've made online. So I know that that's possible. Like that discussion board that I ran, we all actually know each other in real life and are real friends. We've all gotten together. There's been 4 gatherings of those people. We're real friends. Those were real relationships that were formed online. Being online, there's nothing about online that prevents people from having real learning. And there's a lot of things that actually work well online. Like, for example, I spoke with a teacher, Jay Brown is teaching. He does the American Yoga Institute. James Brown, he does the American Yoga Institute, and all of his anatomy piece is online. And he told me, I can teach better anatomy online. Why? Because first of all, he's able to really put thought into every video to make sure it's really complete. Whereas if you're just speaking in front of a class, you can have those materials together, but you might miss a few things. So you make sure everything's complete. And then also people can stop, they can go back, they can rewind it and rewatch it. So there's certain things that work really well online. And I don't really have a problem with things being online. I don't have a problem with things being, I don't know that you can do it totally online, but I've talked with a lot of people who are in situations where they don't have access to yoga teachers. So particularly I've talked to a lot of people who are in like small towns where they have gone away to get training and then they come back and they're not around, they just don't have great teachers around them, or people who have young children who are in a situation where they just can't get to a great class that they love that's across town. You know, like it's like, I'm sorry, like I just can't get my kids down and then also get to this class. So I think that online is like, I don't have a problem with online. I personally would rather see people connect to the teachers that they love online than just take at a local class just because it's there, even though that person really isn't the teacher for them. I think online has just opened the world up where everybody can find the teacher that they're meant to be with. I mean, I studied with Eric online. I ended up assisting him, but he was in California and I was in DC. And the only reason that I was able to learn so much was because we were on a discussion board and I got to learn from him every day. And that was such a generous thing that he did, giving his time. Eventually, I took lots and lots and lots of workshops. I took his teacher training. I assisted him, all those things, but it started online. So I'm a fan of online, and I don't have a problem with it. I have a problem with poor training of any sort. But online, and I particularly Zoom, I love Zoom. You know, like I feel like you and I get to really meet each other this way. And I think that canned videos, they can supplement, but I do feel like you need to have this kind of connection to have real learning.
Right. Yes, that's important as well. As much as I love online programs, since I'm a part of many, and so that's the thing. Like when it comes to online, it's really convenient. You know, there's like the marketing funnels, sales funnels that people do. It's very catchy. It's like, ooh, that's something that I need and I want, and then you sometimes, you know, it's common. And it's happened to me before too, like the shiny object syndrome was like, oh, I'm gonna get this, I'm gonna get that, and you get overwhelmed with the amount of courses, and especially most of them, they don't have a deadline. Like you can just do your own pace, and whatever you can finish, you finish, and you get a certification whenever you can. And then people ended up just like getting caught with everything that's going on in their lives, and or coming up with excuses, and they never end up never finish the courses.
So this is a problem with the online courses in general, because like I take like the Courses That Convert program that teaches you how to develop online courses. And that's part of what I'm doing, is developing online courses. And basically what's happening with a lot of online courses is people are saying like, this is a way I can make money. You know, they have a following. But the thing is that people don't actually know how to design learning properly. So they don't have a lot of the pieces that actually make learning good, and they also overpromise results. So like I talked about, the fact that we know that learning goes in a sequence and that people go step by step. Well, most people aren't aware of that, and they're not helping people to move from where they're at to the next step. I took, for example, with the sales coach, who she's amazing. Like, one of the things that I so appreciate about her was that I got to experience a great sales experience when she sold me on her class. And she made me see that it was possible to do sales in a way that was fully in integrity and not, like my experience, my idea of what sales was kind of the used car salesman. And she made me realize like there was more to it than that. So I was really grateful for that. But I took a class with her where she was like, okay, how much money do you want to make? And I was like, oh, I want to make like $300,000. And she's like, okay, and then like, think of that. And then like, essentially was promising that I could make however much money I could dream of making by just doing this course. Well, I didn't really understand sales, like what I needed to learn, what she realistically could have taught me in that course was, let me teach you the basics of how sales work, and then get you started with sales and sort of assist you and let you listen in on me and let you try a little bit on your own. If she had said that, I would still be studying with her. But you know what? I'm not still studying with her because she made a promise that she didn't keep to me. And that's why I teach people how to build, proper learning, because this is what's happening in the yoga world. We are making promises to people that we can't keep. We're telling people we're going to make you a yoga teacher, and then you get through that $3,000 program and you can't teach because either you came in not ready to actually accomplish that, or because we didn't actually teach you what you needed to know. So to me, these online programs, it's the same thing. They're just poorly designed learning. And it's not, the fact that they're online has nothing to do with it. I took my master's program online and it changed my life. I did go and do some pieces of it in person, but it was really my choice to do it that way because I felt like it was important to make those connections to people. But the program really was life-changing. And that was all mostly online learning. So there's nothing that says online learning is not the problem. The problem is that there's a lot of people who don't know how to teach, who are developing programs that don't meet the promises that they're making. And I want us to be in integrity as teachers. And I think that the way that we become in integrity as teachers is by understanding teaching methodology so that we can deliver on our promises. And I think that's good business. I think that's how, I learned all about those marketing funnels, but the piece that people didn't say, the funnels, if you haven't studied them, basically they're saying like, you bring people, you get a lot of people leads, people that you bring in to your business. And then you're kind of sorting through until you find those people that are really your committed customers. But what they're not telling you is that you have to meet the promises at every step of the way. And that it's a test. When you bring those people in and they have that coupon for a free class, that you have to be a fantastic teacher and really help them through that first class and show empathy and help them to learn a lot in that first class that makes them want to come back. And that piece, that meeting your promises, that is done by understanding how learning works. So that, to me, it's a problem with these online programs, is that it's the same as any bad teacher. It's the in-person teacher training, same problem, bad learning design. People just don't understand, why aren't you coming back to that class? Why aren't you excited to return and learn more? It's because you're just not feeling supported. You're not feeling that somebody cares whether you do make the next, you do take the next thing or not. Like, that should be part of their program to make sure that you're returning. I think something like 90% of these online courses, people buy them and then don't actually go through the whole course.
And a few reasons why they don't go through the full course is because of how they're run. Like, some of them just, okay, you get everything all at once and then that's it. There's like no follow-up or anything, like no.
Yeah.
weekly discussions and there's no motivation, no
No
drive.
sense of community, a sense of connection to the other people, a sense of responsibility to the other members of the class, which is part of what makes people show up. There's an online program that we at GAB we've been following, and it's called WP Elevation. They teach people to do WordPress sites, people who are professional WordPress developers. But their community, the way that they have structured their learning, we see it as a great model. And they have very involved email follow-up sequences that they have for people who join their classes. They do a lot of, they have a lot of community. They have a map that shows where everybody is online. They just have a lot of nice features that bring people back into the program and reach them, which is missing from a lot of these online systems. And a lot of people, I mean, and also like technically it's a lot of work to set that up. It takes people, and if you're setting up your first class, like it's pretty hard to do that. So, you know, sometimes simpler is easier. You know, open up a Zoom link, create a Facebook group, you know, and just feed people videos. Like it doesn't have to be so sexy. And I think a lot of people are really caught up in trying to make it all, you know, automated and stuff like that. And there's just a ton of technical work that goes into that. And so, you know, a lot of people are trying some things out right now. And I just think that, you know, a lot of people see this as a way to make money. And they're trying it and they just don't quite know how to do it.
Right. And if people say, okay, if you don't know certain part of the things that you need for your business, then hire out, get somebody else to do it. But how much can you invest if you aren't even making money doing this business first, right? So it's like kind of.
Well, we're not investing money into our businesses. We're investing money into ourselves. I've invested a lot of money into my own training. I have my master's. That was a lot of money. My work did help to pay for that, but also like I paid for some of that. And I've invested in sales training. I've invested in courses in entrepreneurship. I've invested in software. I've invested in, you know, like tons of things in my business. But you know, to change my mindset around that of like, oh my God, I might lose this money that I invested in a business. Well, the training that you're taking, whether or not this particular business is successful, it has changed you and it has made you grow. So that is not a loss. And, you know, like if you don't try it, you'll never know. So you get more confident as you go along that that money will not be lost. One of my life coaches said, there's like a scene in, I think it's Raiders of the Lost Ark, where he like steps off the mountain and like a step comes up to meet him. And then, you know, he takes the next step and the next step comes. That's kind of how it works with business, where you have to have that courage to take a step. And then that next step comes. And as you become comfortable with the process of, okay, you know, like this feels risky, but I know I'm supported. I know I have a group of people around me who will take care of me. So I don't think that any of that stuff is a waste. I think that whatever you put, the money you put into your business, whether or not, you know, you end up being successful at it, it has enriched you. And well, who knows where your journey will go with all of this, but I think that all of that stuff you have made an investment in yourself, not in your business. I mean, your business is yourself.
Right.
No, you're not forming some multinational corporation. You know, this is a personal business. So all of these things, the money that you're putting into yourself, the time that you're putting into yourself, that is how you make a shift in your life, money and time.
Right. What I meant is like outsourcing.
Oh yeah, to outsource. Yes. No, I've done a lot of that. And it's basically this whole thing about money and time is like what money will buy you is time. And so if there are people who can get you there faster and you kind of get to a point where there's certain skills that you recognize you don't have, what's happened with me is over time, I've recognized my skill is leadership. And that's kind of been a really weird shift because I used to be a person who sat behind a computer all day long doing stuff. And so the skill of leadership means that I have to outsource a lot of stuff. So I've realized that there's just certain things that I'm just not that good at, but I do understand it, and I'll spend the money on it. And also, I've lost money, and I've done some stupid things. When I set up my business, I had a lot of money that came to me from leaving my day job, and they gave me an exit fee. And one of the things that I did was some of the people that I hired were kind of expensive, but the people that I hired were able to very quickly get me into business. So that there was a price I paid for that. But also there's a couple of people I hired where I'm like, if I had to go back in time, I wouldn't have spent the money on them. And you know what? You're going to make mistakes. So I think unfortunately, we don't know, and every person that's in business has, we would love to, because we only have so much money, we think like, okay, everything has to be perfect, and we have to spend it the right way, because it's also precious. That's why it's important to get support and get help and find people who can give you good recommendations for where to spend your money. But also I just think like, you're going to blow some money. You're going to make mistakes. And that teaches you too, things that you need to know. Sometimes you learn by what didn't work. So it's risky. It is risky. You have to recognize that you have a fiscal responsibility. But yeah, I do think like it's important to recognize, like for example, like if you can make $100 teaching a private and you're spending all this time developing a website, well, you're paying yourself $100 to develop a website, and you may not be very good at it. So then you can think about like, hey, is there somebody I could hire for $20 and then I'm earning, $100 an hour, and then you're making money that way. So
you pretty much said what I was going to say. So. All right. Awesome.
Spending money's scary.
It is. Those are the questions that I have.
Okay.
Right. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Well, I just want to let people know that if they want to reach me, it's Suzanne, SUZANNE, at gabb.co. My website is gabb.co. I'm also on Facebook. The Sadhana, SADHANA community for yoga teachers and enthusiasts is my group. I'd love to have you join my group. And you can also like my page, which is Get a Bigger Boat, on Facebook. And we're also like setting up pages on LinkedIn if you're into LinkedIn. So all those ways are ways that you can reach me. But I really, because we taught so much to yoga teachers, I really want to wind up by saying teaching is important. And please, if you are thinking of not teaching because you don't feel confident in the training that you received, keep going. Find a teacher who makes you, who helps you to keep going. Like, just keep swimming, keep going. It's important. There's not too many yoga teachers in the world. It's not oversaturated. We need more. I don't think that there will ever be enough.
That's so true. And also, if you hear about Suzanne from this podcast, just mention Yogacises. So.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for saying that. So tell me a little bit, Pam, about Yogacises and what you do.
Okay, so what I do is I used to teach at like libraries and privates, mainly chair yoga, and because I ended up just somehow getting a lot of followings with chair yoga, and I started my own routine, and that involves like yoga and exercises. So I ended up just combining them into Yogacises. That's how it all started. Now, since I've had the baby, she's almost 2 now, I've been just trying to do everything online. And I'm starting to kind of like going back to teaching locally again. and probably do like some Zoom or like Skype sessions as well. That's where I'm going. But it's pretty much with this whole podcast and YouTube is to get people to be on, like, share their story, share their experience, share their offers and products, and basically that, and learning from everybody, and also letting everybody learn from them.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. And it's wonderful when you lead those up because you learn who all these people are.
it's great. I love meeting people this way. It's more of a better connection, right? Rather than just, chatting online and just like no, communication this way.
Yeah, I like it too. And when people have put so much time and thought into, what they're creating and their businesses, then you really get to learn about their lives and their focus and their interests, and not just about how they can enrich you, but just it's fascinating to learn about the paths that people have taken and the things that they have to share from that path.
Right. And I'm learning from them and, from their experience. So it's pretty amazing.
I'm glad that you're doing this podcast. Thank you. I think it's a great service.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being on and sharing with us all these amazing tips.
You're welcome. It was nice. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. And I'll make sure I have all your links and everything in the description.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.